Hi everyone. Welcome to our second lecture. I just want to remind everyone that you need to pick three of the following terms, which I'll give you in a second. And these three terms, you're going to want to write a one paragraph analysis about each of them and put it within the context of the overall lecture. So three one paragraph responses and then a one paragraph response to a post made by one of your fellow classmates. Okay, what we're going to be focusing on today is going to be what's called the early Middle Ages. So that's looking at medieval Europe, really from the fall of Rome up until about the year 1000. So we're going to look at some of the major events there and the rise of a religious establishment during the period as a unifying factor, bringing all of Rome together. Okay, here are our terms. First term is going to be Catholic. Second term, St. Augustine's Confessions. Third term, Christian Society. Next term, St. Anthony of Egypt. Next term, Benedictine monks. Next term, Oath of Obedience. Term after that is Vow of Stability. Next term, Conversion of Manners. Next term, Carolingian Dynasty, Carlogian Dynasty. Next term, Charles Martel. Next term, Pepin, Peppin, the short. Next term, Charlemagne. Next term, Louis, Louis, the Pious. Next term, Islam. Next term after that, Muslim. Next term, Muhammad. Next term, Mecca. Next term, Medina, Medina. Next term, Five Pillars of Islam. Next term, Quran, Koran. Next term, Sunni, Sunni. Next term, Shiite Muslim, Shiite, Muslim. Next term, Calip, Calip, Ali, Ali. Okay, well, the first thing that really we see when we think about the early Middle Ages is the establishment of a religious society. We're going to see more and more people are going to see themselves as being members of a Christian society, our first term. So Christian society is the bringing together of all different people and seeing themselves as part of the same society. Often the people of the Christian society are also recognized as a Christian race. Basically what happened, how did Christianity become so influential? Well, we talked last time, Constantine brought it to the empire, and as soon as the people of the leader of the empire converted to Christianity, so did all the people automatically. Well, we're going to say the same thing with the barbarian invaders. So as these different barbarian invaders, some of the tribal leaders turn to Christianity, we're going to see automatically all members of their tribal group also became Christian. Okay, and we're going to see basically there's going to be two types of law. There's going to be both church law, which is called canon law, and that's going to be completely different from what's called state law or secular law. Increasingly in the early Middle Ages, the church authority and the development of the church becomes more powerful than the secular authority. Eventually what's going to happen, there's going to be some fighting between the monarchy, the secular authority, the kings, the lords, and the religious authority, the archbishops, the bishops, and of course the pope. At times they're going to get along very well, work together. Other times they're going to be in opposition to one another. Pope Gelasius, Gelasius, Gelasius I, argues that God has created both the civil authority, so the state, and religious authority, religious law, and that both have to work together to make up Christian society. So Christian society is a combination of both religious authority and the authority of the state. Now, the term Catholic. Which we hear used today. Today there's a distinction between Protestant, those who are protesting the Roman Catholic Church, and those who are Catholic. But at the time, the only true Christians were the Catholics. In Catholic itself, the term Catholic, our next term, means actually universal Christian. So all members of the Christian race were Catholic. Now, the early Christians, even as early as the Roman Empire, had spent a lot of time believing that Christ was going to return any day, and there was no real reason to do anything because they were just kind of waiting to die and waiting for him to, bring them up to heaven. The early Christians didn't care very much about intellectual theories or discoveries. The ultimate authority for all the early Christians was found in the Bible. The Bible was to them the answers for everything. Marriage and sex. They were accepted, of course, as part of human society, part of Christian society, but they were always seen as inferior to celibacy. So the strongest people, those who became the priests and the religious leaders, were seen as those who were able to be celibate, to give up sex. Now, St. Augustine, an early Catholic theologian, he makes an interesting argument in his book, The Confessions. St. Augustine says in the Confessions that just because a person is knowledgeable or educated in the Bible doesn't mean that they will do the right thing. So he's saying that just because people know the right thing to do by reading the Bible doesn't mean that they will do the right thing. So Augustine says he wants the church to be part of everyone's everyday life, not just some special thing that people engage in occasionally on the religious holidays or only on Sundays. Now, when we think of religious leaders, we're probably thinking of, pastors and reverends and priests, and they're certainly religious leaders, but there's also going to be a group of people who are kind of separate from the majority of society, who are also very involved in religious life, and that is going to be the various types of monks. And throughout the course, we're going to be talking about different kinds of monastic orders, different types of monks that exist. The monks are basically going to develop as a way of staying true to the Bible, thinking about the Bible, and spending their whole life centered on biblical ideas. Basically, the various monks are going to believe that people are tainted and corrupt by being members of society, and the only way to really understand God and contemplate his word as shown there in the Bible is to be in seclusion, separate from the majority of people in society. Okay, so let's talk about some of the monks, what their lives were like. Well, the founder of monasticism, so the first monk is going to be our term Saint Anthony of Egypt. Saint Anthony of Egypt is the father of monasticism. So he's going to be the first monk. Now, an earlier form of, so after him, there's going to be a form of monastic order, a group of monks that form in Italy, and they're going to be referred to as Benedictine monks. So the Benedictine monks are going to be founded by Saint Benedict of Nursia, Italy. And they basically are going to kind of set the standard that all later monastic orders are going to follow. Okay, so St. Anthony starts it, but then St. Benedict is going to develop it more. All right, basically the all monastic orders are going to follow basically three things. Well, one thing is going to be called the term a vow of stability. A vow of stability is when a monk agrees to spend his entire life in the monastery. So to be in a monastery and never leave it. That would be making a vow of stability, and that's one of the things expected of monks. Another is our term conversion of manners. Now, the conversion of manners means a monk would spend his entire life trying to improve himself. So every day, just as he's about to go to sleep, he's thinking about what he did wrong during that day and what he can do to improve it in the next day. So they're constantly trying to improve themselves. So converting, the way that they're living, this conversion of manners, trying to improve themselves by becoming more holy, more pious, and closer to God. So that would be the conversion of manners. Now, another term, and this is also going to be basically general to all the different monastic orders that we're going to talk about in the course, is all monks take on a vow of stability. A vow of obedience. Okay, so our next term is a vow of obedience. A vow of obedience means that you completely obey the head of a monastery. The head of a monastery is going to be referred to as an abbot, and you take on this vow of obedience when you become a monk, which means you completely obey the abbot. You don't question him, you don't ask why, you just obey. All right, which of these three would you find the hardest? A vow of stability, staying in the same place and never leaving. A conversion of manners, spending every day trying to improve yourself and become closer to God. Or not questioning your leader's authority or question anything that he has to say. Seems like all of them will be pretty hard. And monks are going to come from different social classes. So all different social classes are expected to be treated the same no matter what class you are. Monks are spending part of their time doing manual labor, so farming, keeping up the monastery, cleaning it, and then part of the time trying to get closer to God, praying in unison, private prayer. So these are the things that are expected of all monks. All right, well, let's talk about where we really begin the establishment of a real beginnings of a kingdom again. So we had all these barbarian groups taking over these different areas, And we have these different barbarian groups like the Huns and the Anglos and the Saxons and so forth. They each had their tribal leaders. The tribal leaders were essentially the boss. What characteristics do you think they would find most valuable in a tribal leader? Do they want someone brave? Do they want someone kind? Do they want someone smart? Do they want someone tough? Well, they're going to care a lot about toughness and aggressiveness and being a good fighter. That was seen as the most important part of a tribal leader. Well, why are these characteristics so important? Because these different barbarian tribes are eventually going to become in various battles with other barbarian tribes. Now, the ones who are best at fighting, they're going to conquer the other ones, expand their power base, and sort of start forming larger groups. Now, what's going to bring them together, these different barbarian groups, is going to be Christianity. Remember, they're seeing themselves as a Christian people, a common Christian culture, a Christian race. So it's Christianity that brings them together. But how well do these ideas really coincide? The idea of a violent, great fighter who's seen as a wonderful warrior, and being a Christian who is supposed to love their fellow neighbor. So definitely some difficulties here. All right, let's talk about one of the largest kingdoms of the early Middle Ages. So the establishment of a true kingdom during the early Middle Ages. Well, the first one is going to be what's called the Carolingian dynasty. So the Carolingian dynasty, Carollingian, Carolingian dynasty. Carolingian actually means coming from Charles. It's going to be a French dynasty, a French kingdom of the early Middle Ages. And the Carolingian dynasty is basically going to have 4 different leaders. Now, why is it called Carolingian? It's called Carolingian because it's going to start with our term Charles Martel, M-A-R-T-E-L. Martel is translated from the French and it means the hammer. So Charles Martel was known as Charles the Hammer, and he's going to basically be attacked by the Muslims. Remember, he's a Christian, and he's going to be attacked by the Muslims at the Battle of Poitiers, Poitiers. So at the Battle of Poitiers in Poitiers, France, he's going to beat the Muslims, force them out of France, and now we're going to see France basically under the control of Charles Martel. So it's the start of a new dynasty. Martel is an excellent fighter. He's going to expand the size of his kingdom. He does it by battling against people from Bavaria and also the Saxons. Now he gets the reputation, Charles Martel, of defending Christianity from the Muslims. So he's seen as a defender of Christianity. And the Carolingian dynasty is going to be a time when the monarchy and the papacy, so both the kings and the religious leaders, are going to get along very well. They're going to work together. It's going to be seen as the purpose of the monarchy is to defend Christianity. And then the kings are going to get the title of priests, and they're going to become not just kings, but actually Christian kings defending a Christian people. So Martel is going to get the title of King of the Franks. So he goes beyond just the tribal leader of the Franks and becomes actually King of the Franks. Now, the son of Charles Martel is going to be Pepin, P-E-P-P-I-N, the Short. Now, imagine being stuck with that name, Pepin. Pepin, and then being called the Short on top of it. There's actually an interesting play, if you get a chance to see it, a musical called Pippin. And Pippin is based on the life of King Pepin II, King Pepin the second of the Carolingian leaders. So Pepin is going to go a little further than Martel. He's going to conquer a little bit more land, and he's also going to get the title of priest. So he's not just a Christian king, but he's a Christian king and a priest. Who's going to give him this title of priest? It's going to come from the papacy, from the Pope. So the Pope is going to give Pepin the title of priest. Now, the third of the Carolingian leaders is Charlemagne. Charlemagne. Charlemagne, or Charlemagne, means Charles the Great. Now he gets the title of Holy Roman Emperor. So he's not just a Christian king or a Christian priest. He doesn't just have a kingdom, he's going to have an empire and a descendants of the original Roman Empire. But then with that also the inclusion of the Pope-backed Holy Roman Empire. And it's a really extravagant ceremony. It takes place in the year 800 where he becomes the HRE, or Holy Roman Emperor. Now, Charlemagne is going to rule from 368 AD to 814. Charlemagne's an example of one of these great Renaissance men that we have talked about before. We've talked about several of them in our face-to-face classes. Charlemagne, is remarkable in how many things he can do. Charlemagne's a great fighter, which is, really important at this time. We talked about that with the tribal leaders. So it's going to continue with these early kingdoms as well. So Charlemagne's an exemplary fighter. He's also very disciplined, a disciplined person. He has a stern personality. He's also a great swimmer. Now, he does a lot of his strategizing and his meetings. He does it while swimming with various leaders and with his friends. He's also a great speaker, and he has an intellectual side. He also liked literature, and he's going to be someone who really puts a lot of importance into literature and encourages it at a time when people really began to think, after really the barbarian invaders, they began to see literature as basically insignificant and a luxury and unimportant next to fighting. So he's going to kind of bring it back and, kind of love it like Alexander did. Alexander, a tremendous fighter, but also a great lover of literature. Well, same thing with Charlemagne. Now, Charlemagne is also going to be, he's going to have many children, and going to be known and admired for his sexual virility. He has 4 wives, 6 girlfriends, and he sires many children after the age of 65. So a remarkable feat indeed. Charlemagne is going to become involved in 50 different battles, and he's known as the greatest warrior of the whole early Middle Ages. He conquers Italy, he conquers Germany, he adds them to the French lands that he already controls. Now, there's only one area that he doesn't conquer. I'm a little scared to tell you where it is because he vowed anyone that would mention it would have their tongue ripped out. Maybe I'll take a chance. Okay, if you hear me without a tongue in the following lectures, I shouldn't have done it. But basically, he is going to, the one area that he did not conquer was actually northern Spain. Okay, you're going to see that he basically built up such a large empire that by 805, this new Frankish empire is going to include all of Northwest Europe with the exception of Scandinavia. Now, just to show you how much warfare was an important part of the early Middle Ages, if we look at the period from 714 to 814, out of this whole 100 years, only 7 of those years were peaceful. So it's expected that there's going to be war. When it's peace, it's an aberration. Now, basically, what you're going to see is one of the biggest problems in the early Middle Ages were the lifestyle of the people. Medicine was very primitive. People were often, with all those battles, they were sick, they were injured, and they just had very difficult everyday lives. Now, they're going to have simple, kind of like tribal herbal remedies for a lot of these. Some of the things that people started having trouble with and basically were taking various herbal remedies to rectify were they coughed too much, they had asthma, they had eye problems, they had stomach aches, they had constipation, they had the opposite of constipation, so diarrhea. They had too strong a desire for sex. They had too weak a desire for sex. So, a lot of difficulties. And one of the biggest problems of the early Middle Ages were the infant mortality rate. Approximately 45% of babies died at birth. So, really difficult time to live. Now, another big problem that of the early Middle Ages was it was a time that was kind of ripe for invasions. Okay, one of the biggest battles that Christians had and were afraid of were the Muslims. Okay, so let's talk about the establishment of Islam during the 7th century. All right. Now, the religion itself, that's going to start in the early 7th century, so the early 600s, the religion itself is going to be called Islam. The follower of Islam, so someone who follows the religion of Islam, is going to be referred to as a Muslim, sometimes also called a Moslem. A Muslim actually means one who submits to the will of God, and the word for the Muslim God is, we'll make this another term, Allah, A-L-L-A-H. So Allah is the God of the Muslims. Now, the founder of the religion of Islam is going to be Muhammad. Okay, so Muhammad is sometimes spelled with a O, so M-O-H-A-M-M-E-D, but it's also sometimes spelled with a U, so M-U-H-A-M-M-E-D. So, but Muhammad is not the God of Islam. He is the founder of this religion of Islam. So in Christianity, the follower of Christianity is called a Christian, but in Islam, the follower of Islam is going to be referred to as a Muslim. So a Muslim means one who submits to the will of God or the will of Allah. All right, so let's see how the religion is going to start. All right, in many ways, Muhammad was kind of the last person you would expect to become the founder of a world-class religion. And Islam is one of 3 monotheistic religions. It's the last of the great Abrahamic or monotheistic religion. So monotheistic meaning the belief in one God. So like Judaism, the first, and then Christianity, the second, Islam is also going to believe in one God, but the God for Muslims is going to be called Allah. All right, so Muhammad. Muhammad was a semi-literate goat herd. And One thing kind of nice about being a goat herd was you had a lot of time on your hands. So I guess that could be a good thing or a bad thing, but he had a lot of time on his hands. He would bring his goats and just let them, spend the day eating and fattening up. And now Muhammad wasn't a particularly educated man. He was actually only semi-literate. So not the kind of person you would expect to be the founder of an important world-class religion. All right, so where did Muhammad live? Muhammad lived in Mecca. So our next term is Mecca. Mecca is the holy city of Muslims found in Saudi Arabia. So one day Muhammad is going to go into a cave in Mecca, and there he is going to have a vision. The vision is going to be from the Archangel Gabriel, and the Archangel Gabriel is going to tell him that Allah, God, wants to speak to him. But Muhammad is of course, shocked. Why would such a mighty one want to talk to someone, like me? There's so many, educated, knowledgeable people in Mecca. Why would he speak to me? But he's the one who gets the holy message from Allah. Okay, so Allah tells him the information that becomes the religion of Islam. Okay, so let's talk about some of the elements of the religion of Islam. Now, just like in Christianity, Judaism and Christianity, Judaism and Christianity are going to have some basic tenets that are the basic framework of the religion. So in Judeo-Christianity, it's going to be the Ten Commandments. Well, in Islam, it's going to be the what are called our next term, the 5 pillars of Islam. All right, so let me tell you about the 5 pillars of Islam. The first of the pillars is called Shahada, S-H-A-H-A-D-A-H. Shahada means the accepting Allah as the true God, the true and only God. So recognizing Allah as the only true God, and recognizing Muhammad as the messenger of Allah. So that would be one of the tenets of Islam, one of the 5 pillars. The second pillar of Islam is called Salah, S-A-L-A-T. The duty of Salah is that every Muslim must pray 5 times a day. They must pray at dawn, noon, mid-afternoon, at sunset, and at nighttime, always facing Mecca. So always knowing where Mecca is in relation to the place that they are praying. And that would be the second of the pillars of Islam. The third pillar is going to be called Zakah. Okay, Zakah is the giving of charity, the giving of alms. Every Muslim is expected to give 2.5% of their income to charity, and they believe that it's going to be returned with a great deal of interest, handsomely rewarded for their generosity. So they're, in many ways, very happy to give it. Now, the fourth of the 5 pillars of Islam is going to be called Sawm, S-A-M. Sawm takes place during the holy month of Ramadan. During the holy month of Ramadan, fasting goes on from dawn to dusk. During that time, a Muslim cannot eat, and a Muslim cannot have sex. The fifth of the pillars of Islam is going to be called the Hajj, H-A-J-J. The Hajj, or the 5th great pillar of Islam, would be a Muslim has the sacred duty to make a holy journey, a holy pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca. So they must go to Mecca, this place where Muhammad heard the message sometime in their life, and many, of course, are going to go more often. Mecca is, as I mentioned, in Saudi Arabia. So that's going to be the fifth of the pillars. Okay, let's talk about how Muhammad's message spreads. And to do that, we have to talk about our next term, which is Medina. Okay, Medina, Medina. Medina is about 100 miles north of Mecca. It's also in Saudi Arabia. What's the importance of Medina? Well, here's the thing. Muhammad tried to spread God's word, Allah's word, and basically he tried his best. He was going to everybody, trying to tell them about this wonderful new religion of Islam and how it would bring them salvation and how Allah expected certain things. But he also faced Muhammad a lot of people laughing at him. They basically said, you, a semi-literate goat herd, don't make me laugh. That's ridiculous. If that's all your Allah is, that he can speak through you, who needs him? He hasn't even done anything for you. What's he going to do for me? So they were kind of laughing at him because they had known him, and they knew he was, up to this point, no one really special, no one really significant. So they felt that, he was making things up and aggrandizing himself, and they just thought it was silly. Okay, so he has a big dilemma here. He's commanded by Allah to spread this message, but nobody's listening to him. What is he to do? Well, he makes an important decision to go to another city. So he goes to Medina, about 100 miles north of Mecca, and there in Medina, nobody knows him. Nobody knows him as the, stuttering goat herd and all the things that he did before. It's almost like going to college, if you go away to college for the first time. Back in high school, you were with the same people. They were often from the same middle school, and, they knew every little silly, stupid thing that you did. They're going to remember it forever. And bring it, back to remind you of it. So, there you really can't invent yourself. Where do you get a chance to invent yourself? When you go away to college where nobody knows you. There you can be someone else. If you were someone who played the cello and was a member of the chess club, you can say, no, I wasn't one of those, quote, nerdy things. I was actually, in football and basketball and, real popular. And, it becomes a way to reinvent yourself. So this gives Muhammad a chance to reinvent himself. He's going to, they don't prejudge him. They listen to his message, and it's going to really take off. A lot of people are going to really like Islam. Well, what is really the appeal of Islam? Well, but one of its greatest appeals is it's a fairly easy religion to follow. It has a few rules. It has a firm belief in these rules, but it's not overly difficult to follow and understand. It doesn't need interpretation like we're going to see later with the Roman Catholic Church. And, of course, the saving grace is the fact that it guarantees salvation. So, you do what you're supposed to. You follow the rules of Islam, and eventually, you're going to gain eternal salvation. So it becomes very quickly a very popular religion. Now, what happens is Muhammad is going to go down with all these followers back to Mecca, and there he gets a lot of people following him. Now he's not just Muhammad, the semi-literate goat herd, but now they see he has a lot of followers, and people are going to now begin listening to his message, like what they hear, and it's really going to take off. It's actually amazing how quickly Islam takes off. Part of the reason why Islam is able to take off so much is because the Arabs at the time, the people from Saudi Arabia, were the world's greatest traders. Well, why is that important? It's important because, what's going to happen? You go to different places to trade your goods. When you're buying and selling goods and talking to people, you're going to discuss religion. People are going to like what they hear about this eternal salvation of guaranteed in Islam, and it's going to get followers throughout not only the Middle East, but in a good part of first North Africa and then other parts of Africa. So very early on, it's going to, in a period of less than 100 years, it's going to dominate a good part of the Middle East and a good part of Africa. And, that continues all the way into the 19th and 20th century, where, these areas have strong Islamic bases. Now, the religion itself, the Islamic version of the Bible, is going to be called, our next term, the Quran. Koran, and the Quran is going to have all the 5 pillars and the various expectations of the religion, and this is going to be, like the Bible would be for the Jew or the Christian. So a primer, basically telling people what's expected of them if they are one of the followers of the religion. Okay, the big problem with any religion really is what's going to happen to it upon the death of its founder. Okay, and that's going to be the problem with Islam. Even though the religion itself is, I said, during the 7th century, really takes off and expands, it's also going to take on 2 different forms. So there's going to be what's called the Sunni Muslim, Sunni, and then there's going to be what's called the Shia Muslims, Shia''ite Muslim, the Shia Muslim. Now, the Sunni Muslims are going to be the ones who follow the belief of, directly the belief of Muhammad. So they never change it. It's only what's there in the Quran as revealed by Muhammad, and no changes are allowed whatsoever. The other branch of Islam, and the 2 don't get along particularly well, the other branch is going to be called the Shia. Now, the Shia Muslims are going to be ones who follow not only the words of Muhammad, but also the words of his both his cousin and son-in-law, someone by the name of our next term, Calip, Calip, and Ali, Ali. Now, Calip actually means deputy. So they're going to follow, the Shia Muslims are going to follow both the ideas of Muhammad himself and then his follower, his cousin and son-in-law, who does make some changes, by the name of Calip or Calip Ali.